My husband's family has a recipe for murder. They call it a tonic. It comes in a cobalt blue bottle, the kind that catches the light and makes whatever is inside look like medicine instead of what it really is. My mother-in-law, Constance, keeps it on the top shelf of her pantry, next to the good china and the silver she inherited from a grandmother who may or may not have existed. She measures it out with a crystal dropper, 3 drops into a teacup, every morning. For the men of the house. She says it strengthens the heart. She says it clears the mind. She says it is an old family recipe passed down from her southern grandmother, a woman whose photograph I have never seen and whose name changes depending on who is asking. I believed her for 7 years. I drank my own coffee, bitter and black, and I watched my father-in-law Henry drink his tonic, and I watched my brother-in-law Marcus drink his, and I watched my husband Ethan drink his, and I thought, this is what old families do. They have traditions, they have rituals, they have secrets that look like love if you do not examine them too closely. I am Lena. I am 38 years old. I am a photographer, which means I have spent my adult life learning to see what other people miss. I am also the daughter of a man who died because a doctor misread a chart and gave him the wrong medication, and because of that, I know the particular shade of yellow that jaundice turns the whites of the eyes. I know the way a person's hands shake when their potassium is too low. I know the smell of digitalis on someone's breath, sweet and green, like a garden after rain. I know what poison looks like when it calls itself care. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you are new here, my name is Lena, and this is the channel where we talk about the families we marry into, the mothers-in-law who greet us with open arms and closed fists, and the moment you realize that the woman who raised the person you love has been trying to bury him all along. If you have ever sat at a dinner table and smiled while someone served you your own erasure, if you have ever been called dear by a voice that sounded like a threat, stay. Subscribe. Because the story I am about to tell you is not about a monster in a fairy tale. It is about a monster in a cashmere cardigan, and the daughter-in-law who learned to fight her with her own medicine. Here's my story. I met Ethan at a gallery opening in Brooklyn. I was there to photograph the installation, a series of rooms filled with broken mirrors and soft light. He was there because his firm had designed the HVAC system, and he had a habit of falling in love with spaces before he fell in love with people. He fell in love with me somewhere between the third mirror and the exit. I fell in love with him when he explained ductwork with the enthusiasm most men reserve for sports. He was kind. That was the first thing I noticed. Not charming. Charm is a performance, and I have always been able to see the strings. Ethan was kind without trying. He held doors. He remembered names. He carried a photograph of his mother in his wallet, not because she demanded it, but because he genuinely believed she was the reason he knew how to be good. She raised me alone, mostly, he told me on our third date, over pasta that he had cooked badly but with great sincerity. My father was distant, but Mom held everything together. She made us feel safe. I should have heard the warning in the way he said safe. Safe is a word people use when they have been trained to be grateful for cages. But I was 30 years old and tired of being alone, and Ethan looked at me like I was a room he wanted to spend his life. So I married him. I married his kindness, his steadiness, his belief that family was something you protected even when it hurt you. The Whitmores were old money, not flashy money. They did not drive sports cars or wear logos. Their wealth was in the walls of their house in Connecticut, a colonial with 12 rooms and a porch that wrapped around like an embrace. It was in the way Constance said our people when she meant the families who had summered in the same places for 100 years. It was in the silence that fell over the table when someone mentioned money or politics, or the fact that Lena, the new wife, had grown up in a duplex with a mother who cleaned houses. Constance welcomed me the way a queen welcomes a foreign diplomat, with ceremony, with scrutiny, and with the understanding that I was allowed to be present but never to belong. She was 70 when I met her, silver-haired, sharp-featured, the kind of woman who wore pearls to breakfast and judged other women for wearing jeans to the grocery store. She kissed my cheek at the wedding and told Ethan I was lovely, in a modern way, and I smiled because I was the bride, and brides are supposed to smile. The tonic appeared on my first Thanksgiving as a Whitmore. I was in the kitchen, offering to help, and Constance was arranging flowers in a crystal vase, her hands moving with the precision of a surgeon. Ethan will need his tonic in the morning, she said, not looking at me. It's a family tradition. The men have it every day. It fortifies them. What is it? I asked because I was curious, because I was trying to find a way into this family, and asking about traditions seemed like a door. Herbs, roots, things my grandmother gathered. She turned then, and her smile was perfect, her teeth white and even, her eyes the pale blue of winter ice. You wouldn't understand, dear. It's an old recipe, very specific. She said specific the way one might say classified. I let it go. I was new. I did not want to be the wife who questioned everything. I wanted to be the wife who fit in, so I watched. I watched Henry, Ethan's father, drink his tonic every morning in a china cup that matched his wife's. He was 7 to 5 then, a retired judge, a man who spoke rarely and listened constantly. He moved slowly, carefully, the way men do when they have learned that their bodies are not entirely theirs anymore. I thought it was age. I thought it was the natural decline of a man who had spent his life in rooms without windows. Marcus, the older brother, drank his too. Marcus was 4 to 5, a lawyer, married to a woman named Patricia who drank martinis at lunch and spoke in a voice that never rose above a murmur. Marcus was sharp, ambitious, the golden child who had followed his father into law and his mother into loyalty. He drank the tonic with the same dedication he brought to his work, and I thought nothing of it. Ethan drank his. Every morning without fail, 3 drops in Earl Grey tea the way Constance prepared it. It tastes like dirt, he told me once, grinning. But Mom swears by it. And Dad took it every day until he died. Marcus too, it's just what we do. I laughed. I kissed him. I took his photograph, the morning light on his face, the blue bottle in the background, and I thought, this is a family quirk. This is something I will tell our children about someday. Your grandmother had a tonic. Your father drank it. It was strange and sweet and a little bit funny. I did not know then that the joke was on me, and that the punchline was death. Henry died 5 years after the wedding. It was sudden. The way these things are described in obituaries written by people who do not want to ask questions. A heart attack, they said. He was in his study, reading the morning paper, and his heart simply stopped. Constance found him. She was calm, the report said. She called 911. She held his hand while they waited. She was the picture of a devoted wife. I photographed the funeral. That was my role, the daughter-in-law with the camera, documenting grief I did not entirely feel. Henry had been kind to me in a distant way. He had asked about my work, nodded at my answers, and then returned to his newspaper. He was not cruel. He was simply absent, a man who had been present in body but not in spirit for so long that his death felt like a formality. At the wake, Constance stood by the casket in black silk, receiving condolences with a grace that made people weep. He was my everything, she told the minister. I took such good care of him. Marcus stood beside her, his hand on her arm, his face drawn. He looked older than 4 to 5. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there a year ago, a tremor in his left hand that he hid by keeping it in his pocket. I noticed it because I notice hands. It is a habit from my work. Hands tell the truth when faces lie. He's tired, Patricia told me when she caught me looking. The firm is demanding. And losing his father, it's been hard. I nodded. I accepted the explanation. I was still new enough to the family to accept explanations. 2 years later, Marcus collapsed in court. He was arguing a case mid-sentence when he stopped speaking. He stared at the judge, he opened his mouth, and then he fell. They called it early-onset dementia. Unusual, the doctors said, for a man his age, but not unheard of, stress, perhaps, genetics. The Whitmores had a history of heart trouble after all. Look at the father. Marcus moved into a facility, a nice one with gardens and private rooms and nurses who spoke in gentle tones. Patricia visited twice a week, drank her martinis, and told everyone that Marcus was comfortable. Constance visited every Sunday. She brought him his tonic. She said it was the only thing that soothed him. I visited once. I brought my camera because I did not know what else to bring. Marcus sat in a wheelchair by the window, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes focused on something I could not see. He looked at me when I entered, and for a moment, just a moment, recognition flickered. Lena, he said. His voice was thick, slow, the voice of a man speaking underwater. Hi, Marcus. I knelt beside him. I took his hand. It was cold, dry, the skin papery. How are you feeling? Mom brought the tonic, he said. His eyes drifted back to the window. She always brings the tonic. It helps with what? He did not answer. He hummed something, a tune I did not recognize, and his hand went slack in mine. I stood. I looked around the room. On the nightstand was a cobalt blue bottle, the same one from the pantry in Connecticut. I picked it up. It was half empty. I unscrewed the cap. The smell hit me immediately. Sweet, green, like a garden after rain, like digitalis. I put the bottle back. I walked out of the room. I drove home in silence. my hands shaking on the wheel, and I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that grief made people paranoid, that I was projecting my father's death onto a family that was simply unlucky, that Constance was a devoted mother and not a murderer. But that night, I watched Ethan drink his tonic. I watched him swallow it without tasting it, the way he had swallowed it every morning for 8 years. And I looked at his hands. They were steady. They were strong, but there were shadows under his eyes that had not been there 6 months ago. And twice that week, he had forgotten where he put his keys. Once he had called me Patricia in the dark, half asleep, and when I corrected him, he had not remembered saying it. "Ethan," I said as he set down his cup. "How long have you been drinking that?" "Since I was a kid," he said, smiling. "Mom started me when I turned 12. It's just herbs, Lena. Don't worry, don't worry." The phrase women hear when men want us to be quiet. I smiled back. I said nothing. But that night, after he fell asleep, I took the bottle from the bathroom cabinet where he kept it, and I poured a sample into a vial I had saved from a darkroom chemical kit, and I labeled it with the date. I did not know what I was looking for, but I knew how to look. The lab report came back in a week. I had sent it to a friend from college, a toxicologist named Raj who worked in a private lab, and asked no questions when I told him it was for a project. The email was short. The results were not. Asterisk sample contains cardiac glycosides consistent with digitalis purpurea. Concentrations sufficient to cause bradycardia, confusion, and cognitive decline with chronic administration. Recommend immediate discontinuation and medical evaluation. Asterisk I read the email 5 times. I sat in my darkroom, surrounded by the chemical smell of developer and fixer, and I felt the floor tilt under my feet. Digitalis, foxglove, the plant that could heal a failing heart in a hospital and stop a healthy one in a garden. The plant that caused nausea, tremors, yellow vision, and death. The plant that, administered slowly in drops over years, looked like natural decline. Looked like age. Looked like bad genes and bad luck. I thought of Henry, dead at 7-7 from a heart attack. I thought of Marcus, 4-7 and lost in his own mind. I thought of Ethan, 40 years old, forgetting names, exhausted by mid-afternoon, drinking his tonic every morning because his mother loved him. I did not cry. I had cried when my father died, in the parking lot of the hospital, for 3 minutes exactly, until my mother found me and held me and told me to be strong. I had used up my tears on accidents. This was not an accident, this was architecture. This was a woman who had built a mausoleum and called it a home. I began to dig, not in the ground, in paper, in records, in the quiet, patient way of someone who knows that the truth is not hidden in vaults but in filing cabinets, in handwriting, in the spaces between what people say and what they mean. I started with the will. Henry's will, which Constance had handled with the same efficiency she brought to flower arranging. It left everything to her, the house, the investments, the trust funds. The children received modest allowances, controlled by her, doled out by her, contingent on her approval. Marcus had signed a power of attorney 6 months before his collapse, giving Constance control of his assets. Ethan had not signed yet. But I found a document in Ethan's desk, a draft power of attorney prepared by the family lawyer dated 3 weeks ago. Constance had asked him to consider it. For his own protection, she said, in case he became unwell like his brother. I found Marcus's medical records. I should not have been able to access them, but Patricia, drunk on gin one night at a family dinner, had given me her login information for the patient portal so I could schedule his rides. I read the notes from 3 different neurologists. All of them mentioned unexplained cognitive decline. All of them noted that Marcus's symptoms improved slightly during a 2-week hospitalization for pneumonia when he was not taking his home supplements. All of them recommended further testing. None of them suspected poison. Why would they? He was a stressed lawyer with a family history of heart disease, taking a traditional herbal tonic recommended by his mother. It was practically a Hallmark movie. I found Henry's autopsy report. I had to request it from the county clerk, using my name, my identification, my status as a family member. It listed the cause of death as acute myocardial infarction. But in the toxicology section, buried in a paragraph of negative results, was a line I almost missed. Asterisk trace levels of cardiac glycosides detected. Consistent with therapeutic digoxin use. Patient history negative for digoxin prescription. Asterisk trace levels, not enough to flag as murder, just enough to raise a question that no one had asked, because Henry was old, because his heart was weak, because Constance was a devoted wife who had already buried him with such grace. I sat at my desk, surrounded by paper, and I felt something settle inside me, not anger. Anger is hot, and I was cold. I was the cold of a camera lens, the cold of a darkroom, the cold of a woman who has finally focused the image and seen what was there all along. Constance was not a mother, she was a pharmacist, and her pharmacy was the family she had married into. I needed proof she could not deny. Proof that would stand in a room full of witnesses, in a court of law, in the court of public opinion that Constance Whitmore cared about more than anything. I needed her to confess. Not to me, to everyone. But first, I needed to save my husband. I replaced Ethan's tonic on a Tuesday. I had spent a week researching digitalis, its half-life, its symptoms, its withdrawal. I knew that stopping abruptly could cause its own problems, so I created a taper. I bought an identical cobalt blue bottle from an antique store. I filled it with a mixture of harmless herbs, chamomile, lemon balm, a touch of mint, that would smell similar and taste benign. I added a drop of green food coloring to match the hue. I swapped the bottles while Ethan was at work, and I held my breath. He did not notice. He drank it the next morning, made a face, and said, "Tastes different. Lighter. Maybe the batch is fresh," I said. He nodded. He kissed me. He went to work. I watched him. For 3 weeks, I watched him like a photograph developing in slow motion. The shadows under his eyes lightened. The forgetfulness faded. He stopped calling me by the wrong name. He started running again, something he had given up 6 months ago because he was too tired. He laughed more. He touched my face in the morning and said, "I feel awake." I haven't felt awake in years. I smiled. I did not tell him why, not yet. I could not risk Constance noticing the change. I could not risk her adjusting the dose, or switching methods, or simply waiting. Because Constance was watching too. I saw it in the way she looked at Ethan during Sunday dinners, her head tilted, her eyes calculating. I saw it in the questions she asked. "Are you sleeping well, dear? You seem restless. Your hands are shaking. Are you nervous about something?" She was fishing for symptoms, for signs that her patient was deviating from the expected decline. "He's fine," I said every time, "just working hard." "Of course," she would say, and her smile would sharpen. "But you mustn't let him overdo it. The tonic only works if he takes it regularly." "He takes it," I said, "every morning." That was true, he took it, just not the one she had given him. I needed more. I needed her voice, her words, the sound of her admitting what she had done. I bought cameras. Small ones, wireless, disguised as a digital clock and a smoke detector. I installed them in the Connecticut house during a weekend when Constance was at her book club, a club I had since learned did not exist, a fiction she maintained to have uninterrupted time alone. I placed one in the kitchen, aimed at the pantry shelf where the tonic was kept. I placed another in the study, where she spent her evenings, and I waited. It took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of recordings of her reading, her knitting, her phone calls to the lawyer about expediting Ethan's paperwork. And then, on a Thursday night, she talked to herself. She did that sometimes. I had noticed it at family dinners, a murmur under her breath, words meant for no one. But alone, in the study, with a glass of sherry and the fire burning, she spoke clearly. "Henry was easy," she said, to the empty room, to the portrait of her wedding day that hung above the mantel. "He never questioned. Just drank it and thanked me." Marcus fought more. He wanted to stop when he started feeling foggy. But I told him it was stress. I told him he needed it. And he believed me because they always believe me. She laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "Ethan will be the same. He's always been the soft one, the kind one, the one who thinks love is a debt you pay with obedience. A few more months and he'll sign anything, just like Marcus did, just like Henry would have if he hadn't been so stubborn about dying on schedule." She sipped her sherry. She looked at the portrait. "You taught me this, Mother. You told me the only way to keep a man is to make him need you. Make him weak. Make him believe you're the only one who can keep him alive. And they never leave, they never stray, they just fade so gracefully." I watched this at 2:00 a.m., in my darkroom on a laptop screen, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold. I watched it twice. I saved it to 3 different drives, and then I called the family lawyer. His name was Arthur Poole. He had drawn up the power of attorney, the wills, the trusts. He had known the Whitmores for 40 years. I had met him at Henry's funeral, a thin man with watery eyes and a handshake that felt like holding a dead fish. "Mr. Poole," I said when he answered his private line. "This is Lena Whitmore. I need to show you something, and I need you to decide if you are the family's lawyer or if you are a lawyer." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Come to my office tomorrow." Alone. I went. I brought the lab report, the autopsy, the medical records, the video. I laid them on his desk like cards in a game I was finally ready to play. He watched the video twice. He read the toxicology report. He removed his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief that was monogrammed with his initials. She has been a client for a very long time, he said. She has been a murderer for longer, I replied. He put his glasses back on. What do you want? I want Ethan protected. I want Marcus's assets removed from her control. And I want her to confess in a room full of witnesses with documentation that cannot be buried. And if I refuse, I reached into my bag. I pulled out a copy of the video, labeled and dated. Then I go to the press and the police and the state bar. I am not asking you to break the law, Mr. Poole. I am asking you to finally enforce it. He looked at the video. He looked at me. You are not what I expected. Mrs. Whitmore. No, I agreed. I am not. He helped me. Not out of courage, I think, but out of fear, the fear of being named as an accessory, of having his legacy tied to hers. He provided me with copies of every document Constance had ever had him draft. He confirmed that the powers of attorney signed by Marcus and Henry were executed on dates when both men had been medically documented as confused. He agreed to attend Thanksgiving dinner as a witness, under the pretense of updating the family on trust matters. And he told me something else, something I had not known. Henry came to me 6 months before he died. He said he thought Constance was poisoning him. He had no proof, just the tonic, the symptoms of feeling. I told him he was being paranoid, that she was a devoted wife, that he should be grateful. Poole's hands trembled. He died 3 months later. I have carried that since. If you can stop her, Mrs. Whitmore, I will help. I left his office with a file full of paper and a heart full of ice. Henry had known. He had tried to tell someone and no one had listened. I thought of my father dying in a hospital bed because a doctor did not read a chart. I thought of Marcus, lost in his own mind, humming tunes to the window. I thought of Ethan, drinking his tonic, trusting his mother, fading by degrees. I was done listening. I was done watching. It was time to speak. Thanksgiving at the Whitmore house was a production. Constance began planning in August. The menu was traditional, the silver was polished, the guest list was curated with the precision of a state dinner. This year, she had invited the extended family, cousins, aunts, the lawyer Arthur Poole, even Patricia, who had not attended since Marcus's collapse. I arrived early. I brought a pie because that was expected. I also brought a tablet, a projector, and a small vial of lorazepam dissolved in a tincture of vanilla and glycerin. It was not poison. It was a sedative, mild, enough to lower inhibitions without rendering someone unconscious. I had obtained it from Raj, who had asked no questions, and I had tested it on myself to know the dosage, the timing, the effect. I was not going to poison Constance. I was going to interview her. She greeted me at the door in a burgundy dress that matched the leaves on the porch. Lena, dear, you look tired. Is Ethan keeping you up? He's wonderful, I said, and I smiled, the same smile I had worn for 8 years. He's helping Marcus into the car. We brought him from the facility. He wanted to be here. Constance's expression flickered, just slightly. Marcus here is that wise. Patricia thought it would be good for him. Family, you know. Yes, she said, recovering. Family. The dinner was set in the formal dining room, the long table draped in linen, candles lit, the turkey golden and obscene in its perfection. Marcus sat in his wheelchair at the far end, Patricia beside him, feeding him small bites of mashed potatoes. He was more present than I had seen him in months. Raj had confirmed that digitalis cleared the system in weeks, and Marcus had been accidentally receiving his meals from a new facility that did not allow outside supplements. His eyes were clearer. His hands were steadier. When I caught his gaze, he nodded. A small movement, but one full of meaning. Ethan sat next to me, his color high, his movements quick and certain. He had not had the real tonic in 3 months. He was himself again, fully himself, and I could see Constance noticing, calculating, adjusting. Arthur Poole sat at the midpoint of the table, his briefcase by his chair, his face carefully neutral. We ate. We made conversation. We praised the turkey, the stuffing, the wine that Constance had selected from the cellar. And then, when the plates were cleared and the pie was served, I reached under the table and turned on the projector. Lena, Ethan looked at me confused. What are you doing? I have something to share, I said, my voice carrying the same calm I used when framing a difficult shot. A family tradition. But not the one you're thinking of. I stood. I walked to the sideboard where Constance kept the good silver. I opened the drawer. I pulled out the cobalt blue bottle, the real one, the one I had taken from the pantry 3 days ago and had tested again to confirm what I already knew. Constance, I said, holding it up. Would you tell everyone what this is? She smiled, but her eyes were watchful. It's the tonic, dear, the family tonic. I've told you about it. Yes, you told me it was herbs, roots, things your grandmother gathered. I set the bottle on the table, but I had it tested, and it contains digitalis purpurea, foxglove, a cardiac glycoside that causes heart failure, dementia, and death when administered chronically. The room went silent. Patricia's fork clattered against her plate. One of the cousins, a woman named Dorothy who had flown in from Philadelphia, gasped. That is absurd, Constance said, her voice steady, her posture perfect. Lena, I understand you've always felt like an outsider in this family, but to accuse me of, I'm not accusing you, I said, I'm asking you. In front of your family, your lawyer, and your sons. What is in this bottle? Ethan stood. Lena, what is going on? Sit down, Ethan, Constance said, her voice sharpening. Your wife is having some kind of episode, perhaps she's been drinking. I haven't been drinking, I said, but you have. I walked to her chair. I picked up her wine glass, the one she had been sipping from throughout dinner. This is your third glass of sherry, and about 20 minutes ago I added something to it. Not digitalis. Nothing that would hurt you, just a mild sedative, enough to make it difficult to lie. Constance's face went pale. She looked at the glass, she looked at me, and for the first time in 8 years I saw fear in her eyes. You drugged me, she whispered. I gave you a taste of your own medicine, I said. Metaphorically. The literal medicine is in the bottle, and we are all going to talk about it. I pressed a button on the tablet. The projector hummed. On the wall behind the head of the table, the video from the study appeared. Constance's voice, clear and cold, filled the room. Henry was easy, he never questioned, just drank it and thanked me. Ethan froze. Marcus looked up, his eyes widening, recognition breaking through the fog of years. Marcus fought more. He wanted to stop when he started feeling foggy, but I told him it was stress. Patricia stood, her hand over her mouth. Arthur Poole opened his briefcase and removed a file, his face grim. Ethan will be the same, he's always been the soft one, the kind one. The one who thinks love is a debt you pay with obedience. I paused the video. The room was frozen, a tableau of horror and dawning comprehension. I looked at Constance, who was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white, the sedative making her pupils dilate, her breathing quicken. You wanted them weak, I said. You wanted them confused. You wanted them to sign their lives over to you and then die quietly, leaving you the martyr, the devoted wife, the grieving mother. And you almost got Ethan. You almost got my husband. I pulled out the power of attorney draft, the one dated 3 weeks ago. You were going to ask him to sign this, after he started forgetting things. After he started needing you. And he would have signed it. Because he loves you, because he trusted you. Because he believed you were keeping him alive when you were killing him by drops. Ethan looked at his mother. His face was gray, his hands shaking, but not from poison, from grief, from the terrible arithmetic of love and betrayal. Mom, he said. His voice was a child's voice, the voice of the boy who had believed her every word. Is it true? Constance looked at him. She looked at Marcus, who was staring at her with eyes that were suddenly, terribly clear. She looked at Arthur Poole, who was holding the file like a shield, and at Patricia, who was crying silently, and at me, the daughter-in-law who had finally stopped smiling. And then she laughed. It was not a sane sound. It was the sound of a mask cracking, of a performance ending, of a woman who had played the same role for so long that she had forgotten where the character ended and she began. Of course it's true, she said. Her voice was slurred slightly from the sedative. The arrogance was undimmed. Do you think I enjoyed being a nursemaid to 3 ungrateful men? Do you think I wanted to spend my life pouring tea and pretending to care about your tedious jobs and your boring little wives? I was beautiful once. I was smart. I could have been anything. And instead I was a wife, a mother, a servant to your father's ambition and your weakness. She turned to Ethan, her eyes bright with malice and something else, something that looked almost like relief. You were the easiest, Ethan. You always needed me, even as a boy. You cried when I left the room. You thought I was your son, and I was the only thing keeping you alive. Without me, you would have been nothing. Ethan staggered back. I caught his arm. I held him up. You're wrong, I said. He was never nothing. You just needed him to believe he was, because if he was strong, he might leave. And if he left, you would have no one to control. I turned to the table. I have medical records. I have toxicology reports. I have the original tonic, and I have the bottle I replaced it with 3 months ago. Ethan has not had a single drop of digitalis since September, and look at him. I gestured to my husband, standing tall, his eyes clear, his hands steady. He's not fading, he's not confused, he's awake, and he is done drinking your poison. I looked at Arthur Poole. He stood, his briefcase in hand, and he addressed the room with the voice of a man who had waited too long to speak. I have reviewed the powers of attorney signed by Henry and Marcus Whitmore. Both were executed during periods of documented cognitive impairment. Both are legally unenforceable. I am prepared to file for the immediate removal of Constance Whitmore as guardian of Marcus Whitmore, and to place Ethan's assets in a protected trust beyond her reach. I am also prepared, he looked at Constance, to testify that Henry Whitmore came to me 6 months before his death and expressed fear that his wife was poisoning him. I failed him then. I will not fail his sons now. Constance stood. She swayed slightly, the sedative taking hold, her perfect posture crumbling. You can't do this, I am this family. I built this family. You built a graveyard, I said, and you called it a home. She lunged at me, or tried to. The sedative made her clumsy, slow. Ethan stepped between us, his hands on her shoulders, holding her gently but firmly away. Don't, he said. His voice was soft, broken but final. Don't touch her. Don't ever touch her again. Marcus spoke then, from the end of the table, his voice rough from disuse but clear as a bell. Mom, you put me in that chair. You made me forget my own name. And I let you because I thought you loved me. He looked at his brother, at me, at the family that had gathered to give thanks and had instead been given truth. I want to go home. My real home, not the place she put me. I nodded. You will, Marcus, I promise. Constance collapsed back into her chair. She looked around the table at the faces of her family, and I saw the moment she realized she had lost, not through violence, not through law, but through the simple, terrible fact that her sons had finally seen her, and they were no longer afraid. The police came an hour later. Not for Constance, not yet. I had not poisoned her, and the sedative was legal, prescribed, documented. But Arthur Poole had called them, and an ambulance and a social worker. Constance was taken to the hospital for evaluation, ranting about ungrateful children and treacherous daughters-in-law, her burgundy dress disheveled, her silver hair wild. She looked, for the first time, like what she was. A woman who had lost control. That was 6 months ago. Constance did not go to prison. The Whitmore name, the Whitmore money, the Whitmore terror of scandal, these things are more powerful than justice. But she did not go free either. With the evidence I had gathered, with Arthur Poole's testimony, with Marcus's restored competency, we were able to have her committed to a psychiatric facility in Vermont. A nice one, with gardens and private rooms and nurses who spoke in gentle tones. The same kind of place she had put Marcus. The diagnosis was dementia with paranoid features and violent ideation. It was not entirely false. A woman who poisons her family for decades is not sane. But it was not the whole truth either. The whole truth was that she was a murderer who had been caught by her own arrogance, and now she lived in a room with a view of mountains she could not own, drinking tea that was only tea, surrounded by people who were paid to care for her but did not love her. I visited her once. I brought my camera. I stood in the doorway of her room and I took her photograph. She did not look at me. She was staring out the window, her hands folded in her lap, her face slack. I do not know if she saw me. I do not know if she understood where she was. But I took the picture and I developed it in my darkroom and I hung it on my wall. Not as a trophy. As a reminder that evil does not always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a mother-in-law who pours your tea with a smile. Marcus lives with us now. He will never fully recover. The digitalis caused permanent damage to his nervous system, but he is better. He reads. He walks with a cane. He plays chess with Ethan on Sunday afternoons, and he wins more often than he loses. Patricia sends postcards from Europe where she is finding herself, and Marcus laughs when he reads them, a real laugh, the sound of a man who has learned that some prisons have open doors. Ethan is himself again, fully, completely himself. He started his own firm, a small one with no clients from his mother's world. He comes home early. He cooks badly. He touches my face in the morning and says, I feel awake, and I kiss him and I do not have to hide the reason anymore. I still take photographs. I am working on a series now. Portraits of survivors. People who have outlived the ones who tried to shrink them. Marcus, holding his cane like a scepter. Ethan, laughing in the kitchen, flower on his cheek. A woman I met at a support group, her face scarred, her eyes bright. And one self-portrait taken in a mirror, my camera hiding half my face, the other half smiling. I am Lena. I am 38 years old. I am a photographer, a wife, a sister-in-law, a woman who learned that the most dangerous thing in a family is not the scream, but the whisper, the tonic, the care, the love that weakens instead of strengthens. I am the woman who replaced poison with chamomile, who turned a Thanksgiving dinner into a courtroom, who looked her mother-in-law in the eye and said, "Not my husband. Not today, not ever. I am awake." And so is he. See you in the next story.